Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Precepts, and if there's some discussion left over for the next month, to continue it the next month, or if it's wrapped up today, that's okay too. The function of the precepts in Buddhism resembles an initiation, in the sense that when people take the Buddhist precepts, that's what makes them a Buddhist. That's the signal to a Buddhist culture that you are now a Buddhist. So in traditional Buddhist cultures, at a Buddhist temple, children take the precepts. We're talking about the first 5 precepts: not to kill, not to lie, not to steal, not to commit sexual misconduct, and not to consume alcohol. Those are the 5 traditional precepts. So as a youngster in a Buddhist culture, you would go to a Buddhist temple, and depending on the particular tradition, at a certain age, usually somewhere between, say, 7 and 12, or sometimes younger, there would be a ceremony called the taking of the precepts. It's usually done collectively, often on something like Buddha's birthday or Buddha's Enlightenment Day. And it's fun. Like the kids gather, and the Buddhist priest says something like, the first precept is do not kill. Can you keep this precept? And all the kids go, yes, we can. And then they go to the next precept, and all the kids say, yes, we can. And then at the end, everybody has a good time, because that means their kid has become a Buddhist. It's now part of that community. In the West, it takes on different ramifications, because very few of us come to Buddhism as children. So to take the precepts as an adult is a whole different pattern, or a whole different investigation. The roots of the precepts in the Buddhist tradition are in a section of the Buddhist canon called the Vinaya. So the Buddhist canon is divided into 3 large sections: the sutras, which are the discourses of the Buddha; Abhidharma, which is Buddhist psychology; and the Vinaya. Vinaya means rules of discipline or rules of conduct. So it's one of the interesting things about this threefold division of the Buddhist canon is that among different Buddhist schools there's strong disagreement about what actually should be in the canon. Particularly in the sutra section, the discourses of the Buddha, there's a lot of disparity between different schools of Buddhism as to what is really a sutra of the Buddha. Did the Buddha really speak that particular sutra? So arguments down through the centuries. Okay. The second section, psychology, there's also disagreement. There's there are a number of different systems of Buddhist psychology competing for attention. The Vinaya, however, is the constant. Don't you think that's interesting? It's not the sutra section, it's not the psychology section. The Vinaya is virtually constant throughout all the different Buddhist traditions. The Theravada tradition, the Mahayana tradition, Vajrayana traditions, Tendai. The Vinaya, rules of conduct, remains very, very consistent. There are some differences. For example, between different recensions of the Vinaya, there might be how many pieces of cloth have to go into a monk's robe. But the differences are really, really minor. They're like that. Why is it that the rules of conduct would be so central This is very interesting. If you understand the Buddha's central insight of interdependence and relationship, then you understand that it is the interaction between people and all sentient beings, right? In which it is in that field, in that interaction, in which the Dharma arises. The Dharma, in other words, is not a personal possession, or something that one does privately. It appears as the realization of the interdependence of all things, right? So the way I like to put it is that in Buddhism there is no such thing as an enlightened being. There is no such thing as an enlightened being because there are no beings. Because to be a being means to be separated, to exist separately. And the Buddhist central insight is that there is only interdependence. Okay? There is only enlightened activity. Okay? So, there's no enlightened being. There is only enlightened activity. Therefore, the Vinaya becomes the core of the Buddhist teaching. How we interact with each other is where the Dharma arises. Does that make sense? Have I lost everybody? Yes? Okay. So in this context, the Vinaya, rules of conduct or ethics, is the ethics of relationship. If an isolated individual could exist, which Buddhism would deny, there'd be no reason for ethics or rules of conduct. But there's also something else to take into consideration when we approach the Buddhist precepts. We come from a culture in which rules of conduct are postulated as ethical absolutes. Right? That is to say, commandments. That is the monotheistic tradition. Right? So the perspective of the monotheistic tradition is that rules of conduct are given as commandments as eternal and unchanging. Okay? They do not arise out of the relationship of living beings. They are presented to living beings from a source outside of creation. Okay? So in that sense, commandments, in terms of ethical absolutes, are unchanging. Different monotheistic traditions have different interpretations of exactly what that means, but the view is very strong. Let me give you an example of how strong it is, and how we as Westerners, when we approach the Buddhist tradition, and particularly the ethics, the ethical domain of Buddhism, how we can bring this view unconsciously. Several years ago I read a book about Zen, and it was discussing the historical interaction in Japan between the Zen tradition and Rinzai Zen. The book was called Zen and the Sword. And there was a whole chapter that said, does Zen have any ethics? That was the question. Does Zen have any ethics? Right. And I was puzzled because the author talked about the crucial importance of the Precepts ceremony in the Zen tradition. It's like in order to become a Zen priest or to study Zen in a deep and a serious way, the taking of the precepts is considered essential. And that certainly sounds to me like an ethical, the ethical dimension of Zen. But he went on and on and on about how Zen doesn't have any ethics. And so I was scratching my head, I was trying to figure out what he meant was that Zen doesn't have any ethical absolutes. Okay? And so from a very strong Western perspective, if you don't find any absolutes in the sense of unchanging eternal principles, you don't have ethics at all. See, that's the conclusion you reach. See? Isn't that interesting? It's like, because if that's what you believe ethics means, and you don't find that, then you conclude it's not there. It's very similar to when Western intellectuals first encountered the Buddhist tradition and they couldn't figure out whether it was a religion or not. Because that's still debated, incidentally. The reason is that in the Western cultural sphere, to be a religion, there's certain signs, that you look for. One is a belief in God, and God, God as the eternal, unchanging absolute. That's not necessary in Buddhism. So in Buddhism, once again, returning to the central insight of the Buddha as the interdependence of all things, there is no creation, myth, or story. There is no beginning. Endless eons and kalpas. It's very interesting. I picked up a discourse of the Buddha, which began 14 million incalculable eons ago. When I was studying with Dipankara Buddha, right, this is the Shakyamuni Buddha speaking, 14 million incalculable eons ago. This contrasts sharply with a certain period in the Western tradition where they calculated that the age of the universe was 6,000 years. Yes? So the reason that there's no beginning is because in dependent origination, okay, if everything is interconnected to everything else, everything co-creates everything else. There is no locus of creation. Okay. So there are some differences, between the two traditions. And when we approach the field of Buddhist ethics, it's we bring with us what I call commandment space. Commandment space. Because the Buddhist precepts certainly do look like the list of commandments we're all familiar with. Do not kill, do not lie, do not steal, be good. When I was the abbot of the Zen Temple in New York City, and I would have discussions about the precepts. It was very interesting. I mean, people like to come to the temple and they like to meditate, but boy, they did not like the precepts. And I come from a very non-religious background. My parents were not strongly committed to any particular church or religion. I mean, we went for long periods of time never going to church at all. So I did not have to reject my spiritual upbringing in order to approach Buddhism. I didn't go through that. So for a long time, I didn't understand why so many people that I encountered in New York, it's like when the precepts came up, it smelled bad. They didn't like it. So I began asking why. And the story I would get in various forms was, I know that. That's like what I was raised with. I rejected that. And it took me a while to understand how deep and serious that gesture was for many people of rejecting the spiritual tradition in which they were brought up with. So I decided to present the precepts as positives instead of negatives. I just realized that Roger Corliss's talk was titled, what was it titled? The positive
aspects of the negative.
The positive aspects of the negative precepts. So I'm presenting the idea, maybe it's similar to what Roger said, that if you change the precepts into positive statements, you get more of a feeling for what the precepts mean within a Buddhist context. Because the precepts are not divine commandments, they are guidelines for our life. They are very useful. If you really take them to heart, they can become your spiritual friend. Something that you can rely on in your everyday life. It's a way of bringing your practice from the meditation hall into the world. Let me give an example. Do not steal. If instead you think of it as respect other people's things, okay, it has a different feeling to it. The reason it has a different feeling to it is the human mind is very clever. So you say, do not steal. And immediately the human mind goes, yeah, well, what if my kids are starving, and I just lost my job, right, do not steal, yeah, right? The human mind is very, very good at that, at creating these exceptions, The reason the human mind is good at that is because existence is much more complicated and much more creative than any system of statements, ethical statements, can encompass. There's a creative aspect to existence. Every single thing which appears is unique and new. Every drop of rain is a different size. Every leaf is a slightly different color. Every photocopy is a different shade. So it's but our concepts are based on memory. Okay, they're based on the past. So what that means is that between our concepts of the world and existence as it presents itself, it never completely fits. There's always like a discrepancy, between, our ideas about the world and what the world is presenting to us. Is that green, blue, or is it aqua? Teal? That's why as humans we keep coming up with new words. So that's why that's an ongoing process. Because the existence keeps presenting us with new situations that we have not encountered before, and we need new concepts and new words to designate that presentation. That also becomes something of the past, and it's an ongoing, constantly evolving process. Does that make sense? So let's discuss the first 5 precepts, and see where they lead us. Incidentally, I actually found a Buddhist sutra. I was going to bring it. Maybe I'll bring it next month. I forgot. It's sitting on my desk. Okay. Where the Buddha does present the first 5 precepts as positive statements. It's very interesting. It's not typical. It's the only time in the canon that I was able to find that, but at least it's there once. So the first precept is do not kill. One of the interesting things is that when you present an absolute like that, immediately the mind goes, well, does that mean human beings, all sentient beings? How's that interpreted? So already in different Buddhist schools, you have different interpretations of that. In Chinese Mahayana Buddhism, it was interpreted as to include animals. And that's why in the Chinese cultural sphere, food in monasteries is vegetarian. So that was when I was in Korea. All the meals served in a Buddhist monastery were vegetarian. Tons of sugar, but no meat. Or other traditions have interpreted it differently. The do not kill means to not kill human beings. The killing animals is okay. If you don't kill the animal, this is where Buddhism gets really interesting. If you have a sort of a scholastic kind of mind. The rule in Theravada Buddhism, as I understand it, is that it's permissible to eat meat if if you are at least 3 people away from the person who actually killed it. So you can and kill it, and then that's okay. Because then you know that they didn't kill it specifically for you. See what happens when you start, interpreting things as if they were ethical absolutes? Then there are other interpretations about do not kill as meaning that it is possible to live your life with a mind that is free from the desire to take life. In here I think we begin to uncover sort of a profound meaning of the precept. That it is possible to live one's life free from the desire to kill others. This would come as a surprise to many people, believe it or not. So there are many, many people in the world whose whole life is consumed with getting back at somebody or other or a group, right? That's, you see it all over the world. So this precept says that it's possible to let go of that. So, hatred is usually the root of killing. And I think of hatred as the anger project. I call hatred the anger project. So, anger arises. Right? So somebody makes you angry. They do something angry. So you cut off in traffic, right? So that's always a good one. Anger appears, right? Then, if you've been practicing, for some time, the anger can move through you. It's just like a breeze, and then it's gone. The anger project is like this. They cut me off in traffic. I'm going to tail them. I'm going to get their license plate. If it takes me 6 months, I'm going to get, I'm going to puncture their tires. I'm going to get back. So that's turning the anger. That's the mind reaching out and clinging to that state. See? The anger has appeared and you don't let it go. In fact, you begin to crystallize the activity of your life around that particular feeling. And it's very painful way to live. Very painful way to live. This is an excellent description of samsara. The Buddhist samsara means cyclic existence. Samsara means cyclic existence. And the Buddha was talking about that kind of back and forth. He hit me, so I'm going to hit him, back and forth, down through the centuries. And vendettas, and back and forth, furiously going nowhere. Furiously going nowhere. That's samsara. It's like a treadmill. Around and around and around, never getting out of this cycle. So how do you get out of that cycle? Primarily through meditation and practice. So how would we phrase that precept in a positive way? Do not kill. How would we phrase do not kill as a positive statement? You said when I first was working on this project of putting the precepts into a positive form, I was not aware of that particular sutra. So it's very interesting. There's no verb in the English language which is the opposite of to kill. There's sort of make-dos, like to give life or to birth or something like that. But they don't quite fit. I thought that was very interesting. That was an interesting discovery for me. But I understand it in a positive sense is to live in the awareness of the interconnectedness of all life. So if you live in the awareness of the interconnectedness of all life, then the desire to kill falls away. If you live in the awareness that you and all other sentient beings are not separate, then that though that anger may appear, you don't turn that anger into a project. Does that make sense? So I call it living in the sacred web of life. And that was the Buddha's core insight, central insight, to return over and over again to dependent origination, that all things exist solely in terms of their interconnectedness with all other things. That's the root insight. And like there the Buddha was under the Bodhi tree, and he looked up and he saw the evening star. How beautiful, how marvelous, how complete. Everything is just like this. But he had seen the evening star before. What did he see that day that he hadn't seen before? He saw that he and the evening star were not separate. Perceived that. And the non-separation of all things. So, the second precept is do not steal. So do not steal is, I like to think of it, as I said before, as respecting other people's things. And that also arises out of that core insight of dependent origination, that core teaching. Because a person does not end with their skin. Yeah? So when you steal something from somebody, in a very real sense, you are harming them. How many of you have had your apartment broken into? Doesn't it feel? It feels like assault. There's this emotional response. It's very, very close to being physically assaulted, and there's a basis for that. Because we do not end with our physical body. So every time you breathe, so if you pay attention to your breath, you will perceive that you do not end with your physical body. If you pay attention to your food, you will perceive that you do not end with your physical body. If you pay attention to your mind, you will see that you do not end with your physical body, because every idea you have is a gift from someone else. So I didn't think of dependent origination on my own. But seriously, every idea in your mind is a gift from someone else. Even the words I'm using to speak today, I learned from someone else. So we do not end with our physical body, and therefore we should respect other people's things.
Isn't it also an acknowledgement or respect that the cause of suffering in other beings is their attachment also to their things, and that it's automatic, you know the state that others are in that, going back to the First Noble Truth. So to steal from them would be to aggravate that situation.
That's a very good point. One of the bases for all of the precepts in Buddhism are what's called substituting self for other. Substituting self for other, which is a Buddhist kind of golden rule. That if you put yourself in the situation of somebody who is being aggressively attacked, you would not want to be in that situation. You would not want to be treated that way. And similarly, if you put yourself in the situation of having something that means a great deal to you, an heirloom, and having it stolen, put yourself in that situation, substituting self for other, then you will become acquainted with what it means to steal. It's a very good antidote to those kinds of inclinations. Substituting self for others is a very good practice, particularly in the ethical realm. It's like when faced with an ethical dilemma, it's a very good way of getting in touch with the ramifications of the situation. It's like to put yourself in the other person's shoes. I mean, sometimes it's hard to do, but it's surprising how often it isn't hard to do if you just give some thought to it. So the third precept is do not lie, and people always have a lot of fun with this one. Sun Sneem used to give the precepts at ceremonies. he would, there'd be a lot of incense and bells, and in the Chinese cultural sphere, one of the things they do with the precept ceremony, I'm not sure if this is true in Tibetan Buddhism, or I'm pretty sure it's not true in Theravada Buddhism, but they burn incense on your arm, so you get branded. So there's this incense brand. So you go like, and they have this little cone of incense, and they light it, and you put it on your arm, and you're chanting, chanting away, and you've agreed to take all the 5 precepts. You hardly notice it because of all the bells and whistles and and stuff that's going on. Then after all the incense burns down and somebody's come around and rubbed some vitamin E or something like that up there, then you'd go up and you'd be presented with a certificate, which also is very traditional. On such and such a day, such and such a person took the precepts. And the precepts of the Buddha were transmitted to so and so. So you go up there and then to get your certificate, and then he'd lean over and he'd hand you the scroll, and then just as you were to take it, he'd like to ask you a question. Okay? And he'd say, suppose you're walking through a forest, right? A forest path, and a bunny rabbit hops across your path. A few moments later, a hunter comes crashing through the woods. So it says, where's the rabbit? Okay? If you tell him where the rabbit went, you'll help kill the rabbit, and that violates the first precept. Okay? If you give him the wrong direction, you'll lie, and that violates the third precept. See, what can you do? So he loved to embarrass people this way. The more nervous they were, the more difficult the question would be. And it's like you're up in front of all these people, and you decide to go, and then he'd say, know when to keep the precepts and know when to break them. But that was his way of teaching that no list of rules can encompass every situation. There are situations that will arise that no matter how long the list is, and the full list for monks is really long, it's like 250. None of these lists can encompass everything that appears. When I took the monks' precepts, there's a whole group of precepts about how to cross a river. There's about 10 or 15 of them. I can't remember exactly. And so you're in northern India. That's important. How to go. There are a lot of rivers. Got to cross them. I was in New York. There was one river. It had a bridge. But there's nothing in the precepts about television or interest rates, So I'm not saying that the precepts don't have value. I'm just saying that no matter how long the list is, conditions change. So he used to love to do this, particularly with the first precept and the third precept, to set up some kind of situation where, to save someone, you'd have to lie, sort of to get it in perspective. But if you think of the first precept as living in the sacred web of life, and if you think of the third precept as speaking truthfully to the presence of the sacred web of life, then telling the hunter, that the rabbit that went that way actually went that way, the conflict is not so strong. Speaking truthfully giving voice to the sacred web of life. Giving voice. Speaking. The other thing is that what I said about statements are concepts. do not exactly fit existence because our concepts are based on memory. So that means that, like if you have the correspondence theory of truth in mind, you're never going to make it. Like, it's like you're always going to be like approaching it asymptotically, or ideally it would be asymptotically, but it's like if the idea is that your statements should match existence in some way, but existence is always creating something new, and your concepts are based on memory, it's never going to quite fit. So the correspondence theory of truth, doesn't work. Or, I don't mean that it has no value, I mean that it doesn't work absolutely. And then telling the truth becomes like this process, not something that is that you like a state that you attain. So we've all had the situation of we weren't at the party, right? Something happened at the party. 3 people tell you about it. Were they all at the same party? It's amazing. They were all 3 at the same party, but it's like the story you hear is so different. And each one of them, we're going to assume that they're not like deliberately misleading you. Okay? So that they are telling the truth as they saw it, as they saw it. So truth is a process, not a condition. So think of the reverse situation. You are at the party and you're telling it to someone else. Well, you have to be selective. You can't replicate, everything. So you're going to, you emphasize this, you leave out that, and you tell your story. The next time you meet your friend, your friend has heard from 2 other people. Your friend goes, "Yeah, well, what about this? You didn't tell me about that." And you go, "Oh yeah, well, that's right, that did happen." and then you're sort of you fill it in, and what I'm getting at is that there's a kind of a dance between our truth telling and the way things actually exist, because concepts simplify reality so much, that it becomes a real challenge to live up to that truth-telling direction. It's an ongoing task. Does that register with people, or does that? So, and then of course there are those situations where, like Sun Tzunim said, where the rabbit is crossing the path. Do you really want to tell the truth in such a situation? I don't know. It's like, you have to get in touch. You have to get in touch with your heart here. You have to get in touch with this compassionate presence. You have to really understand the interconnectedness of all things. Then how you speak. So your speaking emerges from your heart. If your speaking emerges from your head, then it's like you have this list. The rabbit went that way, you said it went that way, so you're not speaking the truth, you're lying. So do penance. But if you're speaking from the heart, the truth of the heart may differ, from the truth of the head. And the compassionate awareness is centered in the heart. It's interesting, after many years of practice, you'll begin to perceive when people speak from the heart and when they speak from the head. It's like a timbre, a kind of a tone color, and people are aware of it even casually when they talk about, say, somebody was sincere. That's often, they may have not, you hear things like, well, they may have not told me everything, but they were sincere. Meaning that that you feel like they were speaking from the heart, that they were not deceiving you. It's a very interesting phenomenon. Yeah.
Yes. Is there anything said about simple silence
I mean, if someone asks you a question, are you actually obliged to answer?
No, that's a little joke. I couldn't resist. Yeah, no, actually there is, there's a lot about silence. Thank you for bringing that up. In the Buddhist sutras, there's more than a few sutras when the Buddha was asked a question, he simply did not respond. And there are a few sutras where he explains that, like why often it was the most frequent reason he would not answer a question is because he said that such a discussion does not lead to the cessation of suffering. And there are many people who understand that subject, but I'm here to talk about how to bring about the end of sorrow. That kind of discussion leads away from that. And with a certain kind of person, even to explain that would get them in, would wrap them up, in contentiousness. And so he remained silent. And then there's a very famous episode in the Vimalakirti Sutra, it's called Vimalakirti's thunderous silence, and it's supposed to be the ultimate expression of the Dharma. From that perspective, the truth of interdependence exists before thinking. So, before there was the concept of interdependence was the truth. Okay? Therefore, interdependence is not interdependence. Interdependence is just the name for interdependence. Okay? So, but true interdependence has no name, has no form. It's before thinking mind. Okay. This before thinking mind has many names: Tao, Buddha, Buddha nature, God, holy, matter and dialectical motion, absolute. Okay, but true Buddha nature has no name, has no form, before thinking mind. Therefore, holy is not holy. God is not God. Holy is just holy's name. God is just God's name. Does that make sense? Okay, so how do you access that before thinking mind? How do you speak from that mind before opposites appear? Before opposites arise. Okay? Because in the interdependence of all things, there are no opposites. Okay? Okay, there's no over here, and there's no over there. Okay? So only this before thinking, luminously clear, unhindered presence. Okay, but that's just the name also. So only return to primary point. Okay? Only enter into that before thinking mind. How do you do that? Release all clinging. Okay? Let go of all clinging. Okay? And the luminous clarity and spacious compassion appears. Okay? Only that. Very simple. Why can't we do it? Because we have bad karma from the time we were a rock. so you're like clinging to form, clinging to appearances, clinging to ideas. Okay. That luminous clarity vanishes. But that is the true nature of our situation. So, That was a long answer, sorry.
Very helpful.
I just want to say from my tradition, well, I've taken the precepts in my tradition, and the one word that we always use, which is I think really important, is motivation.
Mm-hmm.
For every one of all the 5 precepts and all your bodhisattva laws and everything else is motivation. In the case of the rabbit, your motivation is not to harm the rabbit, so you will easily go that way, the wrong way. So if your motivation is not to harm but to do good, then that's, I think, the key to your precepts, keeping your precepts.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very that's crucial. So that's the bodhicitta, appearing. If you're, that's what I was trying to get at about being centered in the heart. It's like and aware of that interdependence. So, incidentally, I do not mean to say that words are bad. Okay? If getting rid of words would lead to enlightenment, we could all go down and get a lobotomy. Words, too, are of a luminously clear nature. Okay? Words, too, are of a luminously clear nature. It's in the Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 lines, the beginning talks about this before thinking mind, and about the inadequacies of words and concepts and this and that. And then the Bodhisattva says, but words too are of a luminously clear nature. See, everything in existence exists interdependently, including words. So if you understand words and concepts as just one aspect of this fantastic display, of this interconnected display, then words and concepts do no harm. Words and concepts are wonderful. I mean, we need to distinguish between a rock and an oncoming truck in the middle of the road. So that's concepts allow us to do that. It's when we try to freeze our conceptual scheme, that is a primary origin of suffering. So, it is now noon, and I haven't gone through all 5 precepts. I hope you don't mind. I didn't get to the one that everybody really likes, the sex precept. So we can save that for next month. Somebody at the retreat asked me to discuss the Dharma in terms of relationships. So maybe next month we can go over the 3rd precept and also the Dharma in terms of relationships, friendships, lovers, that kind of understanding from the perspective of the Dharma.
It's an excellent example of not being attached to have you cover the 5 precepts. I find my orderly mind saying, oh my God, he's going to run out of time, you won't get to the other, just because the 5 are there. And it's an excellent example that you really need to, we got what we got, the reality. And just to balance off the thing about the rabbit, if the hunter is trying to feed 300 children in a starving landscape, hey, there's the rabbit. I mean,
I love. See, this is what you can spin endless variations on this. Because the concepts are a generality, and then you fill in the particulars. It's like maybe he just wants to get a pelt to sell for money. Maybe he is needs a rabbit stew for his kids. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.